Just a short message to wish festive greetings to all of my listeners and a great 2022. We have a packed program lined up for you next year. Now, if you've enjoyed our content, I'm asking you to consider making a small one-off donation to help kickstart the show in 2022. Just think of it a bit like that cheeky fiver your gran would pass you on Christmas Day or your birthday. It's just a few clicks at coldwarconversations.com/donate. Now, back to our episode.
I was awakened by a phone call, and my friend said, can you bring in my roll of black and white film? And I said, okay, no problem. He said, there's a coup in progress.
This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to first-hand Cold War history accounts. Do make sure you follow us in your podcast app so that you don't miss out on future episodes. Today's episode is different. Brett Elliott died earlier this year, and I was contacted by his ex-wife Polly, who offered me a cassette tape. Polly and Brett had met in college and got to know each other in Russian Club at Oklahoma State University. In the summer of 1991, they went to Moscow to pursue Polly's goal of being a reporter in Russia and Brett's goal of further studying Russia. They both worked together covering the Bush Gorbachev summit, with Polly as a reporter and Brett as an interpreter. Polly left Russia early, but Brett stayed a few weeks more and witnessed the collapse of the Soviet Union in August 1991. And during a rare phone call, Polly begged him to be careful, and he famously said she was worse than the coup leaders if she wanted to deny him getting out to witness history. Now, this podcast relies on listener support to enable me to continue to capture these incredible stories and make them available for free. You can support my work and help to preserve Cold War history via one-off or monthly donations. Just go to coldwarconversations.com/donate for more information. You can also join our Facebook discussion group where Cold War Conversations continue between episodes. Just search Cold War Conversations in Facebook. This episode is the audio from the cassette of Brett, and being 30 years old, the sound quality is not great. However, the immediacy of Brett's words just 1 month after the coup attempt provide us with a powerful eyewitness account of a key moment in the last months of the Cold War. I'm delighted and honoured to welcome Brett Elliott to our Cold War conversation.
I'd been to Moscow a couple times before. In 1987, I studied at Leningrad State University. In 1988, in the fall, I went to the Pushkin Institute in Moscow. And so I was ecstatic to get to go back, and this time not have instructors and leaders and people telling me what to do and where to go and what to see. So I got to see a lot of Moscow this time around, and that was a good experience for me. It was late July, early August was when the summit happened, and I worked for CBS News for the week, just prior to when President Bush came to town, and right all the way up through the summit. And so I thought that was the high point of my summer, and so did Polly. So she came back to America. And I don't know, has anybody been, how many people have been to the Soviet Union? Okay. Well, when you go, you'll find out that life is, well, you've read, I'm sure, but life is a struggle on its own. It has its own dynamic. As far as eating, I think it would be nice to have somebody cook for you. But I never worked that out for 3 months I was there. So I basically, being the kind of person that doesn't like to cook, if you don't mind cooking, you can get around okay. And so we basically we cooked some, we shopped some. In the markets, you can get all the food. We were there in the summertime anyway. You could have all the food you wanted for not too much money. Let's say, a kilogram of beef cost about 50 rubles, and the exchange rate was, at the beginning of the summer, 27 rubles to $1, and at the end it was 32. So for a little less than $2, you could have 2 kilograms of beef. So it wasn't that expensive. Generally, I ate out, and we ate out, and then when the coup happened, I generally ate just a meal a day. I sort of fudged on the Russian experience and had McDonald's some because it was enough calories in one meal to get me through the day, and I got to see more that way. So what happened, let's see, Polly had been gone for a couple of weeks, and we agreed to... I called her on her birthday, and she called me. That was the 13th of August, and she called me again, and we said, that's it. That's the last time we'll talk. I'll see you on Monday, August 26th. And then on Sunday, August 18th, I went to an air show because it was Air Force Day. They have floats today. They have for the Navy, which happens a month before, and at the end of this day, then they shoot off fireworks. So this day, I went to the air show, and I saw at the very end of MiG-29, which I thought was it. So I thought that was going to be the end all of power, military power. Of course, before this, a couple of years before, I had seen tanks and missile launchers and missiles going towards Red Square for their demonstration for the October Revolution. They celebrate that on November 7th. And so that was exciting, too, just seeing the tanks go by. So I'd seen these two different things, MiGs and tanks in the street, all for show. And then after the show, I went to what is called Manege Square. And it used to be called Ploshad Revolucji. Okay? And it's called Manege Square because on this huge demonstration area, I have a picture here. This huge demonstration area here is this place called the Manege, where they used to train people how to ride horses. So that was Sunday, and I also did one other thing that was something I hadn't done in the time. I've lived in Moscow for about 5 months total. I never, I think when my group went to see the Lenin Museum, I was doing something else back in 1988. So I went to the Lenin Museum that day. I looked around the Lenin Museum, and it's a really extensive biography of Lenin. So that was the end of Sunday. And on Monday morning, I was awakened by a phone call. And my friend who was living, well, we were living in the same place, but he was at another location. He called me and said, can you bring in my roll of black and white film that we had bought the other day at the Ukraina hotel? And I said, okay, no problem. He said, there's a coup in progress. And I'm still asleep like this. Having lived from 1987 off and on in the Soviet Union, I wasn't that surprised when he said there's a coup in progress, because this was something that when I was there in 1988, especially one of my roommates, all the time he kept saying, I'm going to be here when something like a coup happens, when people are protesting in the streets. Well, we were there the whole time. Nothing exciting happened like that. And so I asked my friend, he's from Holland, and the art director of the Moscow Guardian, he told me about this coup in progress. And I said, well, tell me more. I don't know anything. I don't understand what's going on. And he said, I don't really know anything more. He may have told me a few different things. He may have told me Gorbachev is ill. He may have told me that Yanayev was assuming the powers of the presidency of the Soviet Union. He didn't know much more. So I had a shortwave radio, so I tuned into the BBC, and I listened, and I heard the same thing as you were hearing, that Gorbachev was ill. And so I may have picked that up first on Radio Moscow, I'm not sure. And that Yanayev had taken over, and the situation was tense, and they didn't know what exactly was going to happen. Now, I don't know if I heard the tanks were in the streets, but by the time I got to the Moscow Guardian film at about 11:45, my friend said, yeah, there have been reports that tanks are in the area, okay? And in the area for us is down not near Red Square, so her office was not far from there. So we walked to Red Square. We walked through Red Square, and it looked just like a normal day, sort of cloudy. At this time of year, it's cloudy, rainy, and then all of a sudden the clouds will move away, the sun will come up, and it'll be hot, sort of hot. So you're taking your clothes off and putting them back all the time. It was one of those kinds of days. There was a man in front of a video camera, and he was giving, I heard his voice. It was had a southern accent, and he said something like, even in these times when there's new leadership, a coup, bad times in the Soviet Union, 100 people have been saved. Okay, and this guy's in front of a video camera, sending feeds back. Right, so I'm just saying to myself, this is business as usual these days in Moscow. Okay, everybody can say whatever they want. So we walk on through, and they're tourists and people, maybe even a few black marketeers, or we call them farsovщики, and nowadays they call them speculators or businessmen, walking around selling army watches, etc. It was just one of those kind of days. Was we walked by what is called, there's the Historical Museum, and then there's two alleyways. We walked through one, and that's when we saw our first troops. And when we walked through the square, I looked back and I thought, wow, I should go back to Red Square. It could be more interesting back there. But as we tried to walk back through, they were then clearing Red Square out. A militiaman grabbed my arm and, sent me the other way. So we stood around in the square for a while and saw a demonstration building up here. Yeltsin is telling the people to go on strike. And that's what this sign says. And that's what they're saying and all this. And so while all this is happening, I really hadn't had a whole lot of time to think back, but I'll share a little bit with you. Of course, what we were all thinking probably was this seems reminiscent of something that happened in the past. And I spoke to a group yesterday in Tulsa called the Kiwanis Club. And most of those people, a little bit older. And so in 1964, that was the year that I was born, in April. And most of you maybe were born a little later than that. And so here's what the newspapers were saying in 1964, reminiscent of what was happening today. So here's what it said. On October 17th, Nikita Khrushchev has been ousted by the Soviet Union's Communist Party and replaced by Leonid Brezhnev, who will take Khrushchev's job as first secretary, and Alexei Kosygin, who will take over as Soviet premier. The change in leadership happened quickly, surprising most Western observers. Initially, spokesmen at the Kremlin said Khrushchev was leaving because of poor health. Same thing they were saying on the radio. But today, Pravda, again the mouthpiece of the Communist Party, the official news agency, ripped into the deposed leader, which clearly indicates he fell from grace in the party. Pravda called Khrushchev's leadership one of harebrained scheming, immature conclusions, and hasty decisions and actions divorced from reality. It also suggested he had promoted his own cult of personality for which he had criticized Joseph Stalin. So that was the backdrop. These coup leaders weren't very imaginative, and it was very clear. It wasn't totally clear at that point, but especially by the time Tuesday had passed, the people on the BBC, the experts and all, were saying things don't look right here. Okay, for example, Gorbachev, as far as people could tell, was still alive. Yeltsin, of course, was still alive, and he was standing up on tanks, giving speeches, rallying the people. Also, it was Monday night when I got home at it was 11:30, something like that, in Moscow. I got a call from Poland, and everyone back home, of course, was worried about me. But the fact that I had a call showed that communications were still up, and those wouldn't be very hard to disconnect those simple lines like that. So let's put me back where I was. I was on Magnier Square, and remember, this is the day after I'd gone to see, and what I'd gone to see at the Magnier was hold the sign back up again here. This was for the Afghan War. It's an exhibition that they were showing there. It was a good exhibition, and a bit ironic, perhaps, that the tanks were going to roll in right next to this, and this column of armor ran all the way the length of the Alexander Garden. So I'm standing in the middle of the square, and I hear armor coming, loud, like this. So I started running towards the sound, and people behind me were screaming, and as I turned back around to look, just imagine this group of people running, but not running straight, running like this. Some people going straight. Confusion. They didn't know what it was exactly at that moment. They were emboldened, but also I think they were frightened. Okay, and I have to admit, I was the same way. I wasn't sure. I didn't take this picture of the people looking the other way, but I wasn't sure myself. And as I looked at the position that I was in, I was standing sort of towards the garden, in a defensive position almost. So that if indeed they were shooting, I could run this way. Okay, but these people up at the very front were very bold. Okay, like at Tiananmen Square. But the tanks, as soon as the people got in front of them, I'm not sure exactly what they did. I think they may have given a little bit of ground. But as they did that, this lead piece of armor just stopped, okay, which set the tenor for the whole day that was to pass. So I've got these two pictures. I'll pass them around. This is the first one, and then the second. So I'm amazed, and I walk up, and I start taking picture after picture after picture of this event that's going on. People just walked up and down this armor column, and they talked to the soldiers, okay? And some of the things that they talked about, they hopped up on the armor, and they put their arms around the guys and said, "Hey, why don't you guys turn these tanks around and go home?" Actually, armor. By this time, I hadn't seen any full-fledged tanks. Like the very first thing here was a barrier mover, let's say, okay? It was something that you just knock over anything in its way, okay? And there was one moment when I remember this woman of about 50 or so said, she was yelling up at him. She said, "What's wrong with you boys? Don't you have any pride? Don't you have any shame?" Or whatever they were talking to them, you know? And they said, "You guys wouldn't. We brought you up correctly. You wouldn't dare shoot your own people." And she kept admonishing me. Then there were some gentlemen standing next to me, and they said they were much more skeptical of this fact. They weren't afraid at that very moment, but they were asking the question, what about a day from now, 2 days from now when things change? And these gentlemen who probably had served, well, more than likely served in the military, knew the answer, that these guys would shoot if given orders, real orders, okay, that never really came. So I walked up and down this armor column for about 2 hours, and this picture I took on top of a bus that was now a barricade. And it wasn't that I was being that daring at that point, because I was up there with young boys, men, women, okay, taking this picture. It just gave me a really nice vantage point for what was going on. That, like I said, that line of armor ran the length of the Alexander Gardens. Now, there was one man who was extremely animated, and he had long hair for the military, graying, and he was really talking to the people. And people, the Russians were really interested in talking if the military people would talk back, right? And so this picture that I took right here was a flash. And just seconds before I took this picture, somebody had taken a flash picture of him, and he became upset over this fact. Well, anyway, I got him sort of like this, right? He was sort of upset, but not really. He was like, maybe the conversation should end here. But one of the things that he said was asked of him, what will you do? They said, okay, so you've come here and you've made it clear that you're not going to shoot people, you're not going to be killing people. And that's all well and fine. But what happens if we start throwing bricks at you? Then what are you going to do? And this was this guy. He was like the one who had the answer for the people. And he mainly said, don't try that. There's no point, right? Because we will defend ourselves, okay? Then a little later, about 2 hours passed, and I was, at this moment, I believed that I was seeing the only armor in Moscow. You had this strong feeling, you're like, I'm seeing everything that's going on, when in reality there was armor all over the city in different locations on the other side of Red Square, patrolling, okay? So I stuck around there. I knew what I had seen. I was in a good location. Here's the Kremlin Wall. I was walking through the Alexander Gardens, which is strange also. They didn't secure the Alexander Garden at this point. There were tourists still walking around, checking out the cathedrals behind the Kremlin Wall. And on this wall was written what seems even more defiant than just standing and but stopping a tank. I mean, that was defiant enough. This said, I don't know if anybody saw this on the news, but it says, Niet dictatury. It says, no to the dictator. And has an exclamation point. Okay? So I took a snapshot of that. And then, about a half an hour later, a rainstorm came up. So this next picture I have my umbrella up, and I take a picture with the zoom a little bit closer. And these people had raced out and with buckets, and they were wiping away the whitewash, okay, that says no to the dictator. Okay, so that was the general mood by the people who were down on the square. Okay, so that was at about 3:30 and about 4 o'clock. Some strange things that I saw. For example, I saw a lady giving a tour in Russian, and she was looking back at the Kremlin Wall, armor evident all around, and she was giving this tour. She was saying, this is such and such a tower. It was built in 1434. It's such and such a height, and very matter of fact, as in tourists is wont to be. So I thought, I hadn't seen enough, of course, but by now the whole area that I had been walking in was secure, okay, and the military was trying to move people there. Their objective was to take Manege Square and basically to go all the way around the Kremlin and secure a perimeter. And so they were slowly doing this, just asking people to move. When people would move, then they would take them around. Okay. So I went up to McDonald's at about 4 o'clock, and there wasn't a long line that day for McDonald's. Sometimes the line can reach up to an hour that I found, maybe even longer. I don't know. If you would stand in line that long for a hamburger. So I went in. I had my lunch. I had my meal for the day, because there wasn't time to have a lot of meals on a day like Monday was. And let's see, I can tell you what I had that day. I had, remember, I was starving. Okay, all the excitement I've been through. I had a Big Mac, a cheeseburger, 2 orders of fries, a Coke, a Sprite. And then after all of that, then I bought a shake and a apple pie. Yeah. I got sick on Thursday. I got really sick on Thursday. Thankfully, everything was over by then. So I went out to the square. It was warm, and it had been raining, but it wasn't raining now. And I sat down. I set a book down. I sat down on a bench. And I was drinking a strawberry shake, and I'd already eaten my pie. I had a backpack on, and I had an umbrella in my hand. I sat down, and I heard the sound of armor again coming up. And I grabbed all my stuff, and I started running along the park. It's Pushkin Square. Okay, this is where McDonald's is located. Pushkin is located on the other side of Tverskaya. Okay, on the other side of this street called Tverskaya, which the military was trying to secure. And I got to the top of the stairs, and just before the people had stopped, now there was one armored vehicle went by, another one went by, turned left, another one went by, and then the people got in front of the armor again. And the armored people driving these armored pieces weren't prepared to crush people. Okay, so they were stopping, and they stopped, and that's where I got up there at that point. And it was a really amazing sight. I mean, I'm right on McDonald's, and behind me are cars trying to pass by this way, beep beep, and the police are trying to hold a little bit of order. But there was a sense of sort of lawlessness in the city, and people did basically, well, to the military especially, they did what they wanted to. They were asking them to turn around, okay? And when this happened, in front of this column, the people were now climbing up onto the armor. But to the sides, these guys were a whole lot more serious, and so they were given orders to jump out of their vehicles and keep people away. And there's a picture of a young lady being told, and the guy's got his gun at the ready, so you can see. And you got to remember, this is on a very busy street that leads right down to the Manège Square, and then eventually to Red Square. After about 10 minutes of seeing things like this gentleman with the white, blue, and red flag in his hand, and being told to get away, sure enough, here's a picture with McDonald's anyway. They were convinced that they weren't going to get very far that day. Here's another one. McDonald's. And so they turned around. And I was really excited by now. I was on my final roll of film. I knew I had to buy more. And this event was taking place. So I took a bunch of snapshots, but I got one particularly good one as they were driving away. This shows the white, blue, and red flag. Men, people, all over the armored vehicle, and Coca-Cola sign in the background. Well, anyway, you can take a look at this. I was really excited as I was going back, and I was pretty close to this, I assume, standing right in front of it. So, though I was a part of this whole scene, I was a voyeur on their revolution. Okay, so I did get involved in demonstrations, listen to speeches, but I also had a camera in my hand. I wasn't one of those people on the tanks with my two fingers lifted up, as you can see in this picture here. Then after that, the people got organized, and a demonstration, and I have a picture of an emotional moment. This is my final picture on this roll, and I had to get more later. And these people are marching. This is a really good picture. You have a lady like this, another one like this, and a guy going like this, like that. And they were serious, right? This will not stand. No to the dictator, like it was written on the wall. So here you go, Bunk. All right. So after that, I marched in this parade, so to speak, this demonstration. And the things here's what they were saying. They were saying, Da Loi, okay, which means basically down, okay. Da Loi Kepe SS, okay, Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Da Loi KGB, okay, KGB. And who else were they saying down to? Well, down to the junta, right? So they say, Da Loi Juntu, right? I heard that the first time, I was like, say, when they say junta, it's really deep in the back of their throats. And when they say, Da Loi Juntu, I can't even quite get how ugly it sounds. They also said Rasia, right? And then they would say Nazia, okay, for the nation, okay? So these are people bleeding for Russia, okay? And they were serious. These people got together just randomly on the street. We marched down by Mayakovsky, the square of Mayakovsky, Ploshchad Mayakovskого, and then we marched down the the Garden Road. Or was it the Kultsa Way? No, it was a garden. And by the American Embassy, and then down to the Russian Federation building. Okay? And I have a picture of the Russian Federation building here. This I took that evening at sunset. Okay? And anyway, the clouds had cleared. This shows you what kind of weather. It had been rainy and cloudy, and then as nightfall came, there was the building. Okay? When I got to the Russian Federation building, or the White House, we'll just call it the White House for simplicity, I was out of film. So I went off across the bridge to the Ukraine, and I saw two tanks sitting like this, and two gentlemen being talked to. Now this picture was a little bit after the fact, but they were being talked into joining forces against the Red Army. And these two tanks, and one of the guys told me, I asked him what these tanks were doing, and he said these tanks are now have defected. They're now part of the Russian, in defense of the Russian White House. Okay, so that was basically the end of that day, and I guess Yeltsin had spoken earlier, and I missed all of his talks that day. And I went back to Red Square, and I saw what was happening. They basically had Manège Square totally. They had all except for a little bit. By the next morning, they did have the square to the military had it, and so I have a picture of that. And as I walked up Tverskaya, I have a picture of me in front of some armor and paratroopers. Okay, and I went to I was wearing my Eskimo Joe shirt that day. That was day 2. Here I have a picture of Edward Shevardnadze, and he was speaking to the crowd out in front of Yuri Dolgoruki on one side, and it's the Moscow City Council building here. And the sign says, Puchisti paidut pod sud, so the junta or the puchists, right, will come to justice, and then don't go along with it. Okay. This was on Wednesday, right before the tanks started leaving Moscow. I have a picture of a young man who was on this vehicle, this armored vehicle here. He took the white, blue, and red flag, and he draped it around his body and drove by 7 tanks that you couldn't tell at this point who they were loyal to, but he was basically imploring them to come over to their side. And one of the final pictures I have here is of a man on top of a barricade near the White House, and he's got his hand on the flagpole, he's got his left hand on the flagpole, and his right hand up like this. And anyway, it's an interesting picture. Victory at that point. Then I got sick on Thursday, and so I missed the ripping, I guess, the taking down of Dzierżynski from Lubyanka, from right in front of there, the first Chekist. And so I didn't get to see that. But the next day I went up to the base, and I have a picture of me with an umbrella. And I was told, I was sort of being yelled at that day because these chips on this base, the people, the Russian council people, were trying to tell people, don't do this because this base is a part of a pre-revolutionary statute. And so they were sort of trying to keep people away from there. So I said, okay. I gave my camera to a guy, and I said, I just want to have my picture taken. They said, okay, for your memory, that's okay. And then this is the KGB building in the background here. And you can see what happened to Felix's statue base. They painted all sorts of awful things on there. Down with the KGB, down with the Communist Party. Felix is a fascist, etc. All right. So then on Saturday was the funeral, and I went down to Manège Square, and I listened to that for a little while. And one of the things that I saw, it was interesting. There were 2 gentlemen with black flags, and as I listened to them talk, they weren't mourning. They weren't in mourning. They were anarchists, philosophical anarchists. The true anarchists were the people the true militant anarchists were the ones who died. One of the young men, jumped on a tank and was covering up the holes so they couldn't see. So they said. I wasn't there that night when the violence broke out. I was there at 11, and the violence broke out at 12. There was a curfew, and I promised my family that I wouldn't get killed while I was over there. So I went in, and anyway, this guy, something like he tried to pull an officer or a military person out of his tank or something like that, and he got shot. 2 other people got crushed. And so this procession, after they met on Manège Square, walked up Tverskaya, turned down Mayakovsky, down the same street by the American embassy where the people had been killed. Apparently this is what they did. This is what they said they were doing in the paper. And then they commemorated them there where they died. Then they went to a place called Vagankovskaya, Kladbyshche cemetery. And that's where For example, Yesenin is buried, a poet who died in 1925, and then is a reverendist poet in Russia, and where Vysotsky is buried, a famous folk singer. So that was the end of my trip, and I came home. I flew back through Yugoslavia from one bad spot to another, spent the night in Belgrade, and was told I was told by the gentleman who helped me check in that things weren't looking too well and some things needed to be hashed out in Yugoslavia. Yeah, he wanted to know what was going on back in Moscow, and I said, what about here? And he said, oh, things aren't too good. And anyway, it was a somber moment, but then I flew home to New York and spent a couple days there, and then I got back to Tulsa on Wednesday. So, any questions? I was, let's see, when the guys hopped out of their vehicles on Tverskaya, I think that was when I was most fearful because I was really close to them, and they were confused because I got the impression that they really had an objective. You know, they've been told, you guys need to get down the street, and they were stopped, and they were confused, and they didn't want people near their tanks, and I was sort of close. So that was one moment, and I think just generally, I think that night at 11, it was a rainy night, it was Tuesday night, and the killing then happened just after midnight, and that was an ominous night, and an attack on the White House was imminent, so the newscasters were saying, and indeed it was all planned, but Alpha Group, from what I could read, wouldn't act the first time in their history, and I think what happened down there, I don't know exactly what happened, but it wasn't, I couldn't figure out why this little group of people tried to do something, and it wasn't a concerted effort because they could have taken Yeltsin out in a short period of time. This Alpha Group or another group similar to it. So let me think if there was any other time I was afraid. There was a really interesting time. It was about an hour and a half after the tanks had rolled through, and I think I really met up with a KGB agent at this point because, I mean, he was, if you could find a stereotypical KGB agent, he had very steely blue eyes, and he was very serious. He was dressed in a dark suit, and I was just lining up a picture of Kutafaya Tower, and then we went across to behind Red Square, behind the Kremlin Wall. And I was just lining it up. I wanted to get the star and the steeple, and I wanted to get some. As it turned out, it wasn't a very good picture that I was lining up because I took it later. But he looked at me and he said, you know you can't take photographs here. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. Let me recollect what he said. We talked a bit. He said, don't do that. And I said, okay, I won't. And then I said, that's good. I don't know why I said that's good. I was nervous. I said, хорошо. And he said, no, it's not good. It's not good. And I said, excuse me, and I won't take any pictures. And I was a little bit frightened by this one individual. Yeah, that was true. I remember that now. Any other questions?
Doesn't typical groups. How much of an indication was the rest of the country getting Moscow?
Okay. I don't know about the rest of the country, but I can talk for Muscovites. They weren't getting good information. Very few people have shortwave radios. Some people might get CNN, but very few know English very well. So what they were doing, though, the way they got the word out, they had just pieces of paper typed and or even handwritten or whatever, decrees from Yeltsin, and they were put all over runoff, and they were put all over the subway system, for example, outside the subway system. And that's how they got their news. And it seemed to work because people were really interested. I mean, everybody walked by and read what was going on. I have a copy of page 2 of the decree that was thrown out of the White House, the Russian Federation building, on Tuesday. Let's see, Monday night. And then, interestingly enough, I got page 2. I can get page 1. It was really, people were fighting for this news, it was this crazy thing. And I had 2 pieces. I gave one away, but it wasn't very much information. Then that night, I'd gone back to Red Square, and a priest then got up and spoke, and then a woman read this decree. And so I had already, wow, this sounds familiar. Sure enough, it's the same decree that I had read by Yeltsin to stand up not to be violent, basically, and to go on strike, and this would not stand. So as far as the rest of the country, I would assume that the rest of the country wasn't getting very good news. Way out. Yes. Okay. Initially, then, right? Let's see. Well, it would be probably about a mile, sort of a mile area. I would walk down, and then across, and then back, and then so it's about a mile. I really walked a lot that day, and I had, unfortunately, I wore my hiking boots, which is okay, but I hadn't been wearing them all summer, so I wasn't used to wearing them, and I had by the end of the day, when after Polly called me, and I sat down and I rewrote Monday. I have Monday down in minutia, and I wrote all that down. I got to sleep about 3 a.m., and when I lay down, it was pain. I had blisters all over my feet. That's how far I walked that day. It was really the most exciting day, of my life. It just happened to be in the right place, whatever, and nobody got hurt on that Monday. Okay. Yes. Every bit of information that came from them was delivered, I think, basically from the speech. Like, it was delivered from their own perspective and then booed, whistled at. Yeah, and then, of course, they had control of all the media, so they were watching on TV and getting it through Pravda and other news sources. And another interesting thing happened. 9 publications were allowed to publish on Tuesday, and one of them said they wouldn't, and that was Izvestia. And I lucked into a copy of Izvestia. They gained a lot of respect from those, especially who were down there. But this is a copy of Tuesday, and this shows Bunding. This is a long flag that's stitched together, and it's the white, blue, and red flag. And then you have a picture of tank stopped and people clamoring. This is a good picture. This is probably on Pushkin Square because Izvestia was right above me. You see, their building is there, and so he zoomed in, or maybe it wasn't that, but anyway, he hopped down and he took his picture. And it says, when I first looked at this, I wondered how this line related to the 2 pictures. And it says, in the conditions of the emergency situation, okay? And it seemed like they were making fun of parodying the situation that was going on here. This was an emergency time, and yet all these people were marching. And so this seemed more like a free press than by a press that was sanctioned by the government. Then I got a hold of a copy the next day. This one I lucked into also. I bought that at Pushkin Square. This one was given to me. The person had extra copies, and it shows the tank that was blown up, and a makeshift Orthodox icon stand, and the people standing listening at the White House. All of their umbrellas. Umbrellas would go up, umbrellas would come back down. In that picture of Yellowstone. So, unfortunately, though, I didn't get Wednesday. I didn't get the Thursday copy of the paper because I was stumbling around that day. Got so sick from all the excitement, whatever. And here's a good picture. This shows a young tank driver with his hand up like this, and it uses a form of son, Simok. And it says, "Don't you have any shame, young son?" Little boy, little son. It's really a classic picture there. And this is there's lots of publications. By this time, everybody was publishing. This has a interview with Vladimir Plesner, for example. And another question. Yes. I don't think they would have been this defiant in 1987. Yeah, things have really changed since then. For example, just on the economics side, when I first got to Leningrad in 1987, my Russian wasn't all that good, and I was in this little bar restaurant type place, and this girl, I was talking to this lady, and she wanted to exchange money with me, right? And she wanted to give me 2 rubles for $1. and now you can get 32 or above, you see. So things have spiraled out of control. They've been allowed to. So at that point, things were still a lot tighter, just from an economic standpoint. People were only beginning to speak out. By 1988, one of my friends who now lives in Boston, I haven't talked to him about this or what he's doing in America exactly. I think he's just working. But he told me that if he was given a chance, he would leave, and he would try to stay away if he could. And he said within 5 years, things would be cracked down again. That's what he believed. This was in 1988. So not only Shevardnadze was predicting this and other people, but also this young man had that opinion. And I had another friend who came to America, but he had no intention of staying. He just came for 3 months to New York, and he made $3,000 and made it back to Russia with $1,200. And he even declared that money. Yeah, he declared it what he said was, I declared this because I don't want them to be able to say, how did you earn this illegally? You have this money. That's it. Thanks a lot.
There's further information such as photos and videos in our episode notes, which will show as a link in your podcast app. Now, this show wouldn't exist without our generous Patreons, so I want to thank one and all of them for their support. You can very easily become a Patreon by going to coldwarconversations.com/donate. And you can also join our Facebook group where listeners just like you continue the Cold War conversation. Thanks very much for listening. It is really appreciated. Goodbye. Thanks for listening right through to the end. I really appreciate it. And maybe check out our store and see if you can find the ideal gift for the Cold War enthusiast in your life. Just go to coldwarconversations.com/store. Thanks for listening.